Hello classmates and internet friends. My name is Andrew and I'm going to be talking to you today about gender and its impact on society. The purpose of this video is to show that gender as a system negatively impacts our society as a whole. I've come up with 3 different basic reasons as to why it still exists today. The first reason is the division of labor. If women are popping out the babies, then they should probably be the ones to take care of them, right? Secondly, it's an easy way to divide any given room, place, or country in half. It also makes it a lot easier to figure out who has the right sexual organs in any given social situation. It's pretty easy to summarize these 3 points with one simple statement. Also, many people will argue that gender is biological. We've learned this in biology class, we've learned this in sex ed. Men have penises and women have vaginas. That's pretty simple, right? And finally, gender exists because that's the way it's always been. I find this argument probably the most convincing because it's the most powerful. How can you argue against an institution that's been in place since before you've even been conceived? My hope is that with the knowledge I give you in this presentation, you, the viewer, can refute these statements on your own. I want to first point out that gender as we know it isn't even real. It's what we call a social construct. Social constructs are ideas created by societies that everybody agrees on with some variation, and are not static across time, location, or culture. Gender is perpetuated in 3 ways: doing gender, socialization, and self-policing. Doing gender is when people behave in ways that reinforce gender's naturalness. For example, everybody performs gender differently. Boys at school perform gender by playing with other boys and picking on girls. Many women perform gender by wearing dresses, makeup, and high heels. In the United States, it's impossible not to do gender all the time due to the nature of English language. Our pronouns are all gendered. It's very difficult to refer to somebody without first referring to their gender. The act of legitimizing something by talking about it or saying it is called performativity. Many children are exposed to socialization and are instilled values of gender through institutionalization at school, as well as through fairy tales they are read as bedtime stories. Snow White has a lot of unfair stereotypes that parents should be concerned about: the helpless maiden, the need for a prince, and the value of beauty above all other traits. The motivation to follow these norms does not always come from the top down. The most powerful social pressures are from associated peer groups. A dark example of this powerful social pressure is in one case of a gang rape perpetrated by 1 adult and 3 juveniles in the presence of 6 bystanders. When the bystanders were interviewed about the crime by the district attorney, many of the bystanders explained that they didn't want to interfere because they didn't want to be made fun of or called a wuss. People strongly believe that gender is a biological reality, that it's explained by science, and that men are different than women, end of story. There do exist differences between the bodies of women and men, but I want to stress that there are many more similarities between the two than there are differences. The use of science to make sense of our institutions and naturalize the construct of gender is dangerous because it legitimizes gender inequality. Using science to legitimize our cultural values is only going to cause more research to be done on those cultural values with the perspective of our own cultural values. It's a cycle that goes on and on. Now that we have an understanding of gender, I want to take the time to explain the ways in which gender negatively impacts our society. After all, that's the purpose of this video. A dichotomous system inherently places one side above the other, which teaches people to value masculine traits above all others. Because gender is considered a natural part of functioning in our society, people who do not take part in society's 2 accepted genders, male and female, are stigmatized because of one identifier that has become naturalized. To not properly do gender in our 2-gender system is to not be human in many situations. A term to describe this phenomenon is abjectness, borrowed from Judith Butler. The people who are most commonly labeled abject in our society are transgender and intersex people. Because they don't conform to one or another sex, there is no pronoun to use for someone who is intersex, someone who does not choose to be male or female. Calling an intersex person an it implies that they're not a person. In English, that's the only word we have, and unfortunately the implication is very unjust. And lastly, men and women alike are held to standards of masculinity and femininity that are unreal and unattainable. Although it's impossible for one person alone to put gender to a halt, there are some small things you can do to try and help little by little. For starters, simply stop aiming gendered compliments at children. Aside from that, it can never hurt to educate yourself and others on this topic. Thank you for watching.